Good evening, everyone. Everyone in City Hall, Council Chambers, thank you so much for being here. It is so good to see familiar faces, and it's really nice to see new faces as well. My name is Mallory Van Abema. I'm the new Community Opportunities Coordinator. I'm stepping into the massive shoes that Constance left behind, if you're familiar with Constance, so I have a lot of work ahead of me. But I'm really pleased to be here this evening as a part of the CityLearn program. I wish you all a happy new year. We're kicking off the first topic this year, and we're focusing on the issue of homelessness. Mindful that this is a charged issue for a lot of folks. We are really pleased to have an opportunity to hear about how Shoreline has historically responded to homelessness and how we're looking at the future to improve the response and better serve the folks who are experiencing homelessness and improve the situation that our entire region and country is grappling with. We're also super pleased to have Carrie with us from Lake City Partners. Lake City Partners is one of a very critical partner service provider organization in the city who serves folks who are experiencing homelessness, and she's going to tell us a little bit about some really impressive, exciting accomplishments, some trends that they are seeing and the folks that they serve, and also some of the programs that they operate in and around Shoreline and mostly in North King County. So with that, I will be monitoring the chat. I see a couple chats coming in, but I'm actually going to pass things off to Bethany Wolbrecht-Dunn, who is our Community Services Manager here at the city. Please, again, as we're going online, drop your questions in the chat. We will make sure that your questions get answered, and if we are unable to answer them tonight, they will be compiled and you will get responses. We will send them out to you because we have your email because you registered via Zoom. Bethany?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to see so many people here today to talk about the issue of the unhoused in our community. Before we get to Carrie and talking a little bit more about the people that actually do the work and work with our community members that are homeless, I did want to give a little bit of background in talking about how Shoreline has been involved in kind of the bigger issue of homelessness. As Mallory mentioned, it's not just here, it's a regional issue. It is a nationwide issue. So just some background, next slide. Just to give you kind of a place setting, there is approximately 28,000 homeless persons in Washington State and approximately 9,700 homeless persons in Seattle, King County. And the data source for that is the 2023 U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development point-in-time count. That is a count that is required by that federal department to be done a yearly basis where, again, they do a count of homeless persons in order to get federal funds from the federal government into our communities. So that happens every year, and so that's the data source. So it just kind of gives you an idea of kind of how many people, and again, it's a point in time, and I see you out there with a question. We're going to have questions after my chunk of presentation, so write it down. Patty, I see you. Next slide. So in terms of a community response, I have been fortunate enough to work for the City of Shoreline since 2000. I started in Housing and Human Services back in the day, and at that time, the only shelter that we had in Shoreline was actually a teen shelter. I see some nods back there. It was up over there. It was a single family home, basically, that was worked with teens. That didn't last very long, and that was really our only shelter in Shoreline. And so for single adults or families, they got referred to other locations. They got told to go downtown, or families were told to go to HopeLink. And even at that time, we didn't have HopeLink in Shoreline. HopeLink didn't have a location in Shoreline. So in one way, we've come a long way in terms of the development of human services and the services that we have for the unhoused in our community. Not far enough, but we have come a far distance in the 30 years that we've been a city. So, so we do, Shoreline does a resident satisfaction survey, maybe you've taken it, every 2 years. And we have been, the issue of homelessness has been, we're number one, has been the number one overall response, that's what the citizens want us, or the residents would like us to work on. Yep. Speaker is, so this one has to be off mute. This computer needs to be off mute. Okay. So this right here, hold on. I got right here. The BWD one has to be off mute. We're fixing it. Oh, they can't hear me. Right here. Just leave this guy. Okay. Right there. All right, we're back. Sorry about that. We think we'd have it figured out after 5 years of Zoom, but we don't. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So it has led, this category, it has led since we added that question in 2000, and we do it, every 2 years. So in terms, again, of what the residents are telling us that they would like the city to work on, the number one issue has been overall response to homelessness. I have also included the third one, which is overall quality of human services, because that's also what folks in community services work on. So just putting that in there, because those are really tightly related. So in terms of addressing homelessness, it is a really complex issue, as I think most folks understand that. There's really not one reason and not one solution to these issues. And it can't be addressed simply within the boundaries of our city, and really not even within the boundaries of our county and of our state, really. As we always say, folks that are struggling with our housing insecurity or that are currently living on the streets don't necessarily know that they've crossed over into Seattle when they take the bus. They don't necessarily know that they've gone into Snohomish County or into Lake City. That doesn't resonate with them, that they have left the city of Shoreline or that they're in the city of Shoreline. So that, like I said, does not resonate with them. So we really need to work in a regional way to address these issues. We can't just stand alone as Shoreline in order to help folks that are unhoused. And honestly, the best way, as it is with a lot of social issues, is to prevent homelessness. And we are, as a city, working on ways to do that. So we also, in terms of our human services funding, do provide rent assistance and other financial assistance through HopeLink and through some other agencies like Shoreline Community Care that provide, like I said, either rent assistance or assistance with paying for heat or car repairs or other bill payment, utility assistance. And again, those aren't solutions because they don't provide that rent assistance long term, but they can be that one solution for someone if they are short that month. Also, in other ways the city assists is we do have some affordable housing programs. We provide a multifamily tax exemption program that provides and requires that to get this tax exemption, the developer has to build a certain percentage rather, of housing units to be affordable in buildings. And that is actually a requirement within the new station areas. So to build multifamily housing within the 145th and 185th station areas, a certain percentage of those units must be affordable housing. So that is something that was put into those plans when they were approved by council in 2015. And again, it is a regional issue of underbuilding, just the lack of housing at all levels, from the biggest homes to the micro apartments. We just don't have enough housing, period. And it's just this direct through line to homelessness. And again, not saying, as I mentioned at the very top, there are many issues and many reasons people become homeless, but the lack of housing and the lack of affordable housing is really, there's just not enough places for people to live. So in terms of flipping this now into what Shoreline is doing, again, as I mentioned at the beginning of my tenure here at the city, it wasn't really I'm sure that there were folks living in Shoreline that were unhoused, but it wasn't really an issue that was top of mind at that time. But I can say in the last few years, it has been something that the council has prioritized and put as a goal. And so again, you see our council has a set of goals, and their goal number 5 is this. I'm not going to read it, but they have focused on this in terms of a coordinated response to homelessness and folks that are in a behavioral health crisis. So with that, we kind of got our marching orders, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what our response has been since that time. I think you skipped one. Maybe? No? There we go. Thank you. So we did have a pilot in terms of kind of on-street outreach with funding from King County that started, I want to say, 8 or 9 years ago, maybe longer. The pandemic has kind of shifted exactly how my brain works with calendars. And basically provided a person to go out on the streets and work with folks in terms of working with them to get into some sort of housing, whether it's shelter or some other stable housing. So it was on-street case management of unhoused persons. And so that became pretty successful. And that was a partnership, again, with King County and then Lake City Partners. They were operating out of, is it Seattle Mennonite Church or Lake City Mennonite Church? And they have a day center, which I think Carrie will mention in her presentation as well. A little smaller organization at the time, but really committed to working with folks. And it was quite successful in getting people resources that they needed, getting them connected. And so we continued to do that. Council continued to fund that in a part-time capacity. And there was also the development of this seasonal winter shelter. And what that was, for 6 months, there was a rotating list of churches that would host from 7 to 7 each night. Again, it was usually like 2 or 3 churches through the 6-month period, but it was a check-in and check-out type of situation. And it was usually the same group of folks that would come back each evening. And so that was also very successful. It got folks not, exposed to the elements in the winter, the rain, the snow, the cold. And it was very generous of the churches, and that was helped by Lake City Partners as well, and funded partially by the City of Shoreline. So out of that, we also worked closely with NUSA, which is the North Urban Human Services Alliance, to create further a severe weather shelter. We had a very cold, I think it was in 2019, a very cold, there was that 3 weeks in February where there was like snow on the ground forever. Like school was out, there was like midwinter break, and the kids didn't go to school for like 3 weeks or 4 weeks. And I believed we had a tragedy in Shoreline of someone unfortunately dying outside. And our community said we're not going to let that happen again. We need to provide a resource for folks to come in from the cold and the snow. That's not what we're going to do here. So the creation of a severe weather shelter, again in partnership with NUSA, was created. The first year, it was held at what was the old police building that we owned on 185th. That's still standing. We don't own it anymore. I think there's a nonprofit that runs something out of there right now. And it allowed folks to come in when there was a prediction of snow or cold temperatures. After that, we were in the process of selling it, so we moved it to St. Dunstan's Church, where it operated for a number of years. Again, we worked diligently to work with volunteers from the community, which was awesome. We had 2 to 3 people come and basically stay overnight with folks. And Carrie or another member of Lake City Partners would come in the evening and in the morning to help people get settled, connect with resources, and help people get moving the next day. It still's not perfect. It's not a perfect model. It's not a preferred model. And I've been there overnight. I've been there many times in the evening. I've responded. I've opened the shelter on Christmas Day. And I've also had to, shoo people out at 8 o'clock in the morning when it's 25 degrees. It is not a good thing. It's not great. So, yeah, it's not the best thing, I'll say that, to have to do that. But if I can say, there is one great story. It was on that Christmas day. My husband and I, we were opening. It was like the first time we activated that winter. Of course, we celebrated Christmas Day at our house, had the brunch with the family. Then my husband and I drove, got some treats at Albertsons or whatever on the way. And when we got there, there was a gentleman waiting, and all he had on was a T-shirt and a hospital blanket and pajama bottoms. And all he wanted to do was get inside. He heard there was a shelter here overnight, got in, and he was cold, and asked to use my phone, very polite, all the things. And he wanted to call his wife and his baby were in Florida. I think you may have remembered this gentleman. And he just wanted to talk to them, tell them that he was safe for the night. And as it turns out, they moved out here for opportunity, had this child. There was some personal tragedy that happened to the place they were living. It really wasn't their fault. And they got back out, but he stayed and just could not get out of that. And all he wanted to do was get back to where he had more support, had family. And just by that connection, he was able to work with Lake City Partners to get a plane ticket back with some diversion money to Florida to get home where he had connection and, could stay with somebody, to find a job, to do all the things. So the next morning when I came back, I rooted through our closet, got him a coat, all those things, because I was like, the hospital blanket was not doing it that day. So that was a really powerful situation, just kind of knowing that, the word got out. We were able to get folks inside. However, what we've seen in the last couple of years at the shelter was just a higher level of need in the population that was coming in, and just honestly a lot more, or we had volunteers that honestly were mostly women. And while we never really had a situation where we had to call the police, safety is first at mind. And it was a little challenging at times. So at the end of 2023, I think, we made the decision was made in collaboration with NUSA, that we were going to have to work on a different model for that shelter in the future, because we needed to work with professional staff who had better training to work with that community, and had better resources too to connect them with services moving forward. So, all right, I've blabbered enough. Okay. So in terms of responding to homelessness, in 2015, the council adopted resolution number 379, which basically declared an emergency related to homelessness in the community. Out of that council goal, number 5 I mentioned, there was a sub-goal talking about siting of a navigation center and or shelter in the North End. And again, that's our marching orders as staff to go forth and work on that. And from that, we created the North King County Shelter Task Force, which brought together folks from the community, people in that field, members of NUSA. And that has turned, since that time, into the North King County Coalition on Homelessness that still meets. And from that has developed the Oaks on Aurora, which Carrie will talk more about. And that project came about, kind of fell into our laps. It's a nursing home which was closing, and they contacted the city and said, hey, we've got this 60-room nursing home that we're going to put on for sale, and would you be interested in that? So King County worked with state in order to have the Housing Authority purchase it for the use of an enhanced shelter, with the long-term goal of putting permanent supportive housing on that site. So that is the long-term goal of it. The Housing Authority decided they did not want to own it, to be the owner of it, so it is currently owned by Catholic Housing Services, with, again, still the long-term goal of permanent supportive housing on the site. But the Oaks as a shelter opened up on April 1st, 2021. So it really happened faster than we could have really imagined. thankfully. So, back a few slides ago when we talked about the regional response needed, statewide response needed, that is what King County Regional Homelessness Authority is all about. So KCRHA, which is what we all refer to it as, was created out of, from King County and the City of Seattle, from long talks of them in order to work together to, I don't want to say solve homelessness, but to work together on the issue of homelessness. It was established in 2019. We came together, the North End cities, which include Shoreline, Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, Bothell, and Woodinville. That's what's considered the North End in KCRHA's planning, sub-planning. We came together and decided to join KCRHA via an interlocal agreement. So what that means now is that the city provides the funding that we would spend on homelessness services. We provide that to KCRHA, and then they fund homelessness services that serve Shoreline residents. So, because KCRHA is already funding the Oaks, they're already funding HopeLink Shelter, Family Shelter. They're already funding Mary's Place. They're already funding housing outreach through Lake City Partners. They're already funding our new severe weather shelter. So it just makes sense to get into that system, less burdensome for the staff to do the reporting. We still get the same connections. We still go out to the Oaks. We still talk to Carrie, all the things. It's one contract versus multiple touches. And we get more information from KCRHA on the data related to that. So they give us a yearly report. They come to council, et cetera. So phase one of that ILA, which just ended, basically says KCRHA was going to implement exactly what our council said, go forth and fund the Oaks, exactly what we said. So that's what happened the last 2 years. And then phase two, they were not tied to that, although they did go ahead and fund the same programs with a small COLA. So really no big changes to the funding that was in place previously. And again, one of the big highlights of that is they're required a yearly report to each city. And it's both a written report and they do come to council. And so they're available to answer questions and do all of that. So here is what was funded in 23 and 24. And this is a yearly amount. So as you can see, we now have that severe weather. As I mentioned, the old model, it was really just the City of Shoreline that was operating this severe weather shelter at St. Dunstan's on 145th. Since that time, we've worked with the 4 other North End cities, and we've created a North King County shelter. And that is run by Seattle Urban League. And now, which is great, they offer Lyft rides. There's a phone number that people can call, and they can get picked up. What we're seeing now, it was activated last year, has not been activated this year. Oh, no, it was. After Thanksgiving, it was for the cold. We're actually seeing more people now, which is great. So they have staff. They come up here. They activate it. Right now, it's still at the church because that church is very responsive and respectful and all those things. And they've been really great partners with that. Obviously, that's not very centrally located along. So we'd like to get it a little bit more centrally located, but we like it here. Our police and fire like it here because it makes it easy to transport folks that they come into contact with when it's cold. But yeah. And then council did allocate additional housing outreach funding each year that did not make it into that we allocated directly to them, had a contract for. So that was just outside of that. And then for 25 and 26, that was just approved. That's the next. Sorry, I know I've been babbling on all the slides and I went quicker. Oh, was there a 20? There. Oh, did I not do a 20? I guess I didn't do a 25, 26 slide. Oh, no, here it is, the 183, sorry. So just in terms of looking ahead, Another thing that our council worked on this year was the 2024 Human Services Strategic Plan. And in developing that, what we did hear from the community is affordable housing, obviously. And again, as we know, that is a direct through line to homelessness. And so in terms of priorities and what we see as kind of the top need, those three categories, sorry, it's not showing up very well here, but basic needs, behavioral health services, and then the category of housing and homelessness. And then in the middle, kind of connecting all of the things would be to prioritize community equity and access to those services. So, and one of the actions the council took was to increase funding for all human services programs. And what that meant was to make sure that we continued to fund the housing outreach program at the, at a higher level. And so that is now KCRHA to fund those programs that we just saw has increased to that amount, 183 yearly for the next 2 years in the city budget. So in terms of, and it's almost time for questions, Patty, I'm ready, you're first, is, we often get the question, what can I do if I see someone in the park during the day, or if I see someone who appears to need help? So there's a couple ways to think about it, right? If someone is sleeping in the park during the day, they're sleeping in the park during the day. That's what they're doing. That is not illegal to sleep in the park during the day. So if they appear that they're unsafe, or that they need medical assistance, obviously call 911, but it's not illegal to appear homeless in a city park. So just to think about that. We do have, it is not legal in Shoreline to have an encampment in a city park. That is true. So we do ask that you can report that to the city. And what we do at that point is we contact Carrie to go check that out and let those folks know that there's services available, here's some options for you, and that we're going to come, the city will come along and ask you to move on. And usually folks do that. They don't stay for very long. Carrie probably knows them already. They move around a lot. So feel free to do that. And they can be reached via that C-Click Fix. You can call that number. You can email that. And then if you are interested in what services are available, crisis connections, and like that 911 number, there's King County 211. And then also, feel free to reach out to me. If you Google Bethany and Shoreline, you'll get me. My phone number is all over the website, email. Love to chat about that. If there's any specific concerns you have, whether it's, somebody, I just talked to somebody at a church earlier this week. They were having some issues with someone that was, coming by quite a bit, and just kind of wanted to talk through what was the best way, because they did not want to cause any additional issues, but obviously they needed some assistance figuring some things out. So happy to chat about that. So just wanted to give you some options there. Or if you, So I've talked a lot, and I am happy. I think we've got some questions online. I'm going to grab a mic. I got this one. I'm going to defer to Patty, because I think she's got. And we use the mic because they can't hear you online.
Hi, my name's Patty Hale, so my question actually relates to the very first slide. So you used 2023 numbers for the homeless counts, Seattle, King County, and for the state of Washington. So if we use Seattle, King County, which was 9,700, that was 2023. What happened in 2024?
We do, so those are the numbers that were available on HUD's website, and I just wanted to use that as a benchmark. There is That's a great question. To be honest with you, it's not an exponential difference. Hold on, because they can't hear you online, and I know they want to hear you.
I don't know if you folks are familiar when the Seattle Times has a columnist named Danny Westneat. Okay, and he, on January 5th, he published an article that talks about homelessness in the state of Washington. And it's pretty dismal. Let's see. Washington State has the third highest homeless population in the nation, right? And we have 2.5 times the number of people that are living outside. They call them rough sleepers, and it's gone up 57%. And all the statistics are in here, and they're up to date. He's well researched it, and it's a huge problem. And Washington State has not done a very good job of addressing it. My name's Alan Alston, and I worked in Pioneer Square for 25 years. I was safety officer for King County, and I worked in the building that's right next to the train station across Seahawk Stadium. We had 1,600 employees in that building, and I was in charge of employee safety for that building. And so I've watched the situation for years and years and years. And the groups come together and they build housing and they build shelters, but they only scratch the surface of what is needed. And the problem that I always noticed was people need help right now, tonight. They need something to eat. They need someplace to sleep. The rough sleepers, as they're called in there, they're sleeping in cars and tents on the side of the hill. And it's something needs to be done to bridge that ability to shelter people and to take care of people that are doing the rough sleeping right now. And it breaks my heart to see it. And you know, Pioneer Square is the term. Oh, I'm drawing a blank on it. But it's just really sad. But I promote helping people right now, tonight. People that you'll find sleeping out there, they need help tonight. And long-term housing, they've been struggling with that issue for years and years, decades. So, but what about tonight? What about the people out there tonight?
Oh, yeah, we'll take a couple online real quick, and then I see you back there. Oh, that's not.
You could try. I don't know.
Hello.
We're gonna ask your questions in order, and I know CJ has dropped questions in the chat around certified peer support specialists and questions around what specifically the City of Shoreline is doing and interest in having, boots on the ground. And I think that Carrie is going to talk a little bit about, how we actually, are present in the community and meeting with people experiencing homelessness in just a little bit. But Bethany, if you want to speak to, Medicaid billing, things like that, Carrie, that's probably something else that you could talk to. And how we can access some of the resources that are available at the state level to support people more intentionally and more impactfully, and also, a space for people to drop in, get supports, get housing navigation. I think back to your comment in the back of, people need help now, so where can they turn now in the community of Shoreline?
Yeah, we don't have a day center right now that has been talked about. The closest would probably be God's Little Acre GLA, which is on 125th in Lake City. There's also Aurora Commons, but nothing here. It has been mentioned as something we would like to do. And then in terms of the other things mentioned, as state funding and things like that, we're not the only solution to. There are other nonprofits. The state is involved, obviously, in terms of Medicaid and Medicare funding. Our agencies do a fantastic job of getting people signed up in terms of behavioral health and other resources at both the Oaks and at agencies like Center for Human Services when folks need behavioral health. That is not something that we can get involved in because that's not where the city, we don't do medical billing. That's not within our purview there. But yes, I think a day center would be fantastic. It would be somewhere also for folks to go when it's cold and rainy because, we've got that, what was that thunder thing or the wind tunnel thing? Thank you, bomb cyclone, yes. You want to do one more online while I'm delivering a mic? Or no?
I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Lori, And I actually am a volunteer over at St. Dunstan's. And in the sense of food needs, we'd run a dinner every Tuesday, rain, shine, snow, whatever. And anybody that has a food insecurity or needs a place to come and get something to eat, we provide that every Tuesday from 5 until 7. And at some point, we do listen to the people that come in from the community, and we give them what we know suggested recommendations on where to go. And that's something that the city needs to address, because as the gentleman stated earlier, the resources are needed like right then and there. It's emergent. Some of these people have been kicked out of their houses or are in a dire situation, and they need to be referred to someplace almost instantaneously. And right now the resources are somewhat limited or dried up. And that's something I think not just the city, but the county and the state needs to get themselves involved in. It's not just a city issue, it's state issue. And as the gentleman stated, we're not fast enough to try to address these issues, if you know what I mean. Do I make sense?
Yes, thank you. And thank you for
Yes.
your service on Tuesdays. That's a great program, and I've often seen people waiting to get in, so thank you for that.
Well, you're welcome to come in and see what we have to offer and to actually talk and see what we do as part of our, how should I say, compassionate mission. And again, like I said, we can't stress enough, the gentleman that I'm sitting next to, how much we try to address the issues that come in. And some of them, as I say, are very, very dire, and some are actually comfortable. So again, I thank you for allowing us to attend this.
Thank you for being here, Lori.
Thank you.
Cool. Hi, my name is Mike, and I just wanted to acknowledge the work that St. Dunstan's does for this community. Like, it's amazing. Every year they go out of their way to help the unhoused in this community, and it's all volunteer, and it's very appreciated. So, and I also wanted to acknowledge what the gentleman over there had said about chronic homelessness and that rate going up so high. The reality of the situation is that visual and chronic homelessness is the representation of our failure to address the issue. And we have to acknowledge that reality. I'm a service provider. I have been for a while. And what I saw up on the budgeting was a lot of immediate, temporary, quick solutions that the city's investing in. But I also saw on the slide before that housing ends homelessness, and I don't see a lot of investment there. But it's because you're working with, and I saw the budget and I see what you're working with, and I think we have this idea that affordability is a label that we have to apply to places and not people. And I'm just curious if the city has considered, let me backtrack a second. So there's 70,000 vacant rental units in King County, according to the most recent census data. But it's not affordable, obviously, right? But it is available. And if you took the homeless numbers that you had pointed out from 2023, it's about 50 some odd thousand, right? If you took the highest rate of a rental of a one bedroom and you took all 50,000 people and you placed them in those unaffordable units, you'd actually save money every year. So I'm just curious if Shoreline has considered maybe creating like a rental subsidy program to attribute affordability to the people of Shoreline.
I would love to comment on that. That's a great question. So when we were talking about the Human Services Strategic Plan, the council did ask us to think big, right? And the subject of either, because we did admit the the HopeLink model, the short-term model, is not a solution. It is a Band-Aid. That's just the facts of it. So, someone that has a gap is going to have that gap every month. And so what is it? Is it basic income? Is it a rental subsidy, et cetera, et cetera? So one of the, we provided some, like maintain the service levels, increase by this much, transformative change, housing levy change. And honestly, there's limits to what they can afford to do just based on city finances. So whether it's basic income or housing vouchers, it's on the table, but it's not a decision. It's a decision that our leaders have to make. Because I do, that is, I do hear what you're saying, and I think you make a valid point. Because there is some cities that have done, have moved forward, like Detroit with basic income, and there's lots of studies about that. So it'll be interesting to see how that works its way out in the next 5 to 10 years. So thank you for that comment. Oh, I have a mic. Why did I double mic there? That was weird. Sorry about that.
Thank you. My name's Christina, and I'm a homeless veteran up here in Shoreline. November of 2022, we had that storm that came through. A tree fell in the house, and the independent landlord that I was living in could not afford the additional electrical stuff the city said had to be done because their insurance didn't cover it. So we became immediately on the streets. We contacted for at least 2 weeks the City of Shoreline, trying to find resources to help not only the landlord do something, but for me, I got no help. So that's the first thing I want to say. I even emailed every single person up there, including the mayor, and said, hey, I need help. This is the situation in this house. This is what happened. Can you refer me? Can somebody help? And I got ghosted. I heard from absolutely nobody. And then second of all, I'm a vehicle liver. My kids and I live in a huge conversion van, and we're constantly bothered by King County sheriffs. I've been told many times when I've been sick coming out of surgery, and I park in front of our neighbors' houses with their permission. They come and they'll help and take care of me. And then somebody else in the community will come, 2 or 3 days, and they'll say, you've got to move along. You can't even be in this neighborhood anymore. So I'm constantly, as a vehicle live dweller, however you term it, bothered by King County sheriffs. Never have had anybody community type, social workery type thing. I get stickers and I get told, and I've even had once, as I had some amputations done on top of my feet, I was told, move your vehicle now, tow trucks at the end of the street. So we're not addressing vehicle dwellers, which there's a lot of us over by the bog, et cetera, that are living in our vehicles that aren't necessarily, you call them hard. I'm blessed. I have a warm vehicle that does keep me dry versus my tent neighbors. But that's a problem we do have in this city, is the sheriff and how we interact with people like myself who live in our vehicles. And maybe there is a need to connect somehow with them, with you, and bridge that gap that is not going on right now with, oh, we know this person's living here over by the bog. We're going to stick a sticker on him. We're going to threaten to tow him. Social workers never come out. So looking at that as a problem that we have here in Shoreline and addressing it.
Thank you for that. And I'm going to slip you my business card, okay?
Bethany, I just want to get one more online question here. And before we get that question, I just want to point out a couple statistics that were pulled together this morning from some state websites, Social Security Administration, also from some of the local entities, Zillow, Rent Cafe, and others. In the city of Shoreline, for a 720 square foot, 1-bedroom apartment, it is currently an average of $1,942 per month for that rent. The Social Security Administration administers an average, or for Social Security retirement benefits, an average of $1,933. That is a, $8 less than required to afford a 1-bedroom apartment without utilities in the city of Shoreline on average. And when we look at Social Security supplemental income for folks who are disabled and other various conditions that are preventing them from working, those folks are receiving an average of $638 a month in benefits. And Bethany alluded to this, and I want to come back to Dominic's question. Dominic mentioned what is the cause? Why are we seeing such, a prevalence and an increase in the amount of people experiencing homelessness in Shoreline, but also in the surrounding communities? And Bethany, I know you're talking to Christina right now, but we are, I'm gonna hop back up so I can get it. Okay, so why is Washington such a mecca for homelessness, or is that a myth? Isn't it the rapid cost in housing here that has exacerbated the problem? And Dominic, thank you also for pointing out that Danny Westney also posted an article saying that King County is performing much better than neighboring counties as far as investment and sustained results when it comes to housing stability. Why are we a mecca? Are we a mecca? Is that a myth? Causes of homelessness.
That's the million-dollar question. If I could have a crystal ball and say, I don't know. I mean, honestly, I don't know why anyone would have a choice to come here and live in the rain outside. That's the question I have a lot of the time. So that's probably true. That's probably true. It's not North Dakota for sure. I think there is some truth probably to that. I mean, some folks say it's because the services are better here. I don't necessarily, I'm not sure that's necessarily true or not. So that's always a question in my mind. I think, the causes, like we mentioned, of homelessness are varied and discrete to the person that the reason why, and complex, which is why there's no one thing fits all. And I do agree with you that the need is right now. So I definitely agree with that point. I didn't really answer it because I don't think I can.
Or can I say something? As somebody out there on a fixed income or limited income, as other people are, there are people that come in from other states. They figure there's a perspective for employment here, work, and then they're laid off or whatever situation that is in their family situation. And then they either have no income or they've had to scale back because of medical issues. And sometimes I see from what I've talked to with the people that I've had the privilege of talking to at St. Dunstan's, a lot of them say, well, Lori, I don't make enough to even pay for a deposit. And from what they tell me, the deposit and the security and the cleanup charges are even more than what the actual rents are on these places. And some of them tell me they don't have an actual permanent address. They can't create one because they don't have a place to actually send stuff so that they can qualify for programs. And that's an issue that's been quite a bit of a problem out here.
Yeah, and another thing to mention in terms of like landlord-tenant is the city council did strengthen tenant protections in late 2023. That did limit some of the move-in, move-out, did not allow junk fees and some other things in the city. So now I'm not saying it solves all the problems, and we continue to look to the state legislature to solve that problem or to help solve that problem so that it's the same everywhere in the state. And so, there's not shopping around of that, but they did take action on several measures that, like again, did allow folks to request to have their fees paid over, payments and things like that, so that would ease some of the move-in, move-out costs, because they are very expensive. You are exactly right. I think now, go.
Yep. Bethany, thank you so much.
And I'll be around.
She will be here, but
after.
we want to make sure that we have an opportunity to hear from Carrie, and we will absolutely give you an opportunity to raise your question as well. Thank you. I see your hand. I'm getting chats here from folks online who are saying, I want to know what the service looks like. I want to know, what resources people actually have when they're outside in this community. So I'm going to pass it to Carrie, and remind me how to pronounce your last name, please.
Czarnecki.
Czarnecki.
It's complicated.
Welcome, Carrie, with Lake City Partners. Thank you for being here, and we will run through your slides.
And thank you, Bethany, too, for addressing a very complex issue in which we're all here in this room tonight very passionate about this topic, as I know you all are. So my name is Carrie Czarnecki. I am the Client Services Manager. I am filling in for my boss tonight, Thomas Burnside, who is the Director of Client Services. But I have had the absolute privilege of working very closely with him in this last year. I'm actually celebrating my 4th year at Lake City Partners this year, so I have been able to see this project really grow from what Jonathan and Melanie Newfield created it to blossom where it's at now. So next slide, please, Mallory, maybe. I'm not sure how many of you are actually familiar with what is going on in your community, and that is one of the things. I'm not from Seattle originally, or Shoreline. To be fair, I'm from Portland, Oregon, and I landed this job on a whim, and I first noticed just how passionate, though, the City of Shoreline is in addressing this issue, let alone leading with compassion. And I've been very grateful to be a part of it and in their response to homelessness itself. So Aurora Oaks, I'm not sure, again, if you're familiar where it is. It's on the corner of 165th and Aurora. It is conveniently right across from the U-Haul, which we have a great partnership with since we are averaging about 2 move-outs a week. Now, that's not happening every time, but the average and the numbers are there. We opened in April of 2021, and we operate at a 97% utilization rate, meaning that there is always a butt in a bed. There are at least 60 people in a bed on any given night. And so, let alone the referral lobby that goes beyond the numbers that you can even comprehend. So we serve specifically single adults, and we are also one of the only shelters in all of King County that do serve partnerships. So this is either couples, we've had mothers and sons, we've had fathers and sons, and so we take a lot of pride in being able to serve those duos. Next slide, please. And so these next few slides are just a little bit more about the space and how this model is just really working and being successful compared to other congregate shelters. So individuals are able to get a room. They are also able to bring their pets if they are under 35 pounds, which is another huge barrier which people don't really think about in terms of shelter, that people are denied shelter because they cannot bring their loved furry companion in with them. And so we take pride in that. And so there are some smaller rooms, and then there are some, yeah, you're fine. No, you're good. And there are some larger single ones. Next one, please. And then these are just examples, and we really take pride, too, at Lake City Partners and people being able to have their own room, their own space. They get their independence back. They have autonomy, and it really just starts with them stabilizing their lives on their own without having to sleep in these bunk-style rooms. But also, I know a shelter is a shelter, but of course, I take pride in the one that Shoreline helps operate and fund. So this is an example, too, of a couple's room. So again, could put the beds together, be a couple, or it could be your mother and son, and we could get a curtain in there. But next one, please. This is, again, more of our facility, so we do not have bathrooms within the rooms. The skilled nursing home did beforehand, but that is beyond us, and so now we have 17 single-use bathrooms throughout the facility. We have 3 showers. No one's normally fighting over those. Hot water. 2 washers and dryers, so people are able to do their laundry. We have basic hygiene supplies. We have a donation closet in which people are able to access and shop for themselves on Sundays. We have 3 meals a day, which is brought to us by the Hunger Intervention Program, and they actually just now started providing meals for our new shelter, which I will talk about soon. And we have parking and Wi-Fi available as well. And another thing I love that the Oaks offers is we do a catered Sunday brunch for our lovely participants from Gorgeous George. Next one, please. So this is an example. So unfortunately, clients are not allowed to cook in their rooms, just given how old the building is. And if everyone started plugging in appliances, we'd have no power. So we have access to the community dining room. Again, 3 meals are served, though. So this is an additional feature in which really, again, enables people to be a better version of themselves, provide for themselves. The independence is gained. So we have access to a microwave, toaster oven, and then every individual is able to get a lockbox for their food in the freezer and in the fridge. Next slide, please. And this is one of our beautiful, well, our only beautiful courtyard. Individuals are allowed to smoke their cigarettes out here, be safe, just be in outdoors without being judged, looked upon, and enjoying their own backyard like you would at your own residency. So this is really fun to have, especially in the summer and the springtime. We're able to do barbecues. We actually just had a community appreciation event in August. I don't know if anyone attended, but we were also able to hold a little bit of that outside. And it's really cool to see clients build community because a lot of them actually do the landscaping all on their own. They just said, put us to work. We want to do this. This is where we live. We want to make it beautiful. So that is all thanks to our clients. Next one, please. And then because of privacy and security reasons, people are not allowed in each other's rooms. We're very strict on that, just in terms of safety for our clients. And so we have these wonderful, beautiful community rooms in which people are able to mingle in. So we have the community room, there's access to books, movies, a community phone for use. We do have a computer room as well, and then just another little fireside room. And then some facts for y'all. So how do people get into this wonderful facility, and what goes into it? And Thomas and I work very closely in terms of how do you get people in here? What is it? And so there are a few things that go into play here. And Bethany talked earlier about King County Regional Homelessness Authority, and we have really tried to replicate their model and how they select people for permanent supportive housing, and that's what we implement here. And so first thing that goes into play is how long have you been homeless for? If you've been homeless for 10 years, we're gonna try and get you into shelter because you need it at this point. I mean, it's a right now problem, so you need it now. And then there are other vulnerability factors that go into play. So if they have substance use, mental health issues going on, if they have physical disabilities, we really try and take those into play as well. Additionally, we do try and help marginalized community groups and get them into housing or into shelter. And then because we are based in Shoreline, all Shoreline referrals do get precedence because we want to be able to serve our Shoreline unhoused individuals first, since this is the community that they know and have grown up in. And so you will see that this is our annual data for the last year, and so 24.5% of our referrals that came through were staying in Shoreline, whether that was in their car, in a tent, even couch surfing. And so we also have at least 63%, I think that's what it says, in North Seattle. And Bethany talked a little bit about Aurora Commons, but considering we are one of the only shelters operating in the North King County end, we do want to partner with communities that are closer to us. So that does include Aurora Commons, wonderful day center on 90th and Aurora. And then who has been completing these referrals, and a lot of it because of the outreach program that is funded by Shoreline. Referrals do come internally from Lake City partners, whether that be directly through our outreach or at our day center in Lake City. Our other biggest referral partner has been Aurora Commons, and we do work closely with other community entities such as the Regional Crisis Response Team, and they have been absolutely amazing, as well as the police department, the city. It's all hands on deck in terms of getting people into shelter. Next one, please. So just some highlights, and I should have led with this, but Lake City Partners is thrilled that NUSA has awarded us with the Outstanding Human Services Award program this year. And considering where we were 3 years ago to now, I'm really honored by that, and we have been doing great work. And I can tell you right off the bat that we have gotten 250 people off of the streets directly into emergency shelter and permanent housing this year. That is numbers that I can't even fathom. Thank you. And so although we do not, unfortunately, guarantee housing as a result of your stay at Aurora Oaks Enhanced Shelter, we do provide a safe and stable shelter in which you can stay. And I do want to highlight this because Thomas has worked really hard to pivot towards getting non-male identifying peoples into shelter, as they are some of the most vulnerable. And so I am really happy to see that we've gotten over 50% of non-male people staying at the Oaks. Next, please. Thank you. So there's been talk, there's been buzz. Yes, it is true. We opened a Kenmore Senior Women's Shelter. Some of these issues that we were talking about folks with the fixed incomes. And that is just something that we were seeing so often. So how were we addressing that? And so we opened this shelter in December. We have about 7 senior women staying there now, a few more on board. We're working on filling it up. And they basically are agreeing to stay, or they're agreeing to spend a certain amount of their income, usually around $500. And the outcome of this will be a shared housing outcome, because a lot of these individuals, a lot of these senior women do not qualify for the programs that the county has to offer, for example, permanent supportive housing. And so this is Lake City Partners' initiative of trying to house senior women together. And so these women have an understanding that, hey, I'm gonna stay in this shelter for at least 9 months, and hopefully Lake City Partners will be able to close the gap. Each individual will pay $500, and Lake City Partners will cover the rest. So if you could share, or thank you. That's fine, you could skip the map. Oh, one more. Yeah. So Kenmore Senior Shelter, thank you, operates vastly differently compared to Aurora Oaks. It's a completely different population that we are serving. It is a little bit more high barrier in terms of we are looking for senior women who do not have serious and persistent mental illness, along with any substance use disorder, and they do need to have a fixed income. The base, I think Mallory said, is about $943, but they have to understand that if they want to stay in this shelter, they do need to be willing to spend $500 of their income to be able to stay here. And so we're working on looking at private market housing for these women, again, as what the county offers really just isn't going to be adequate for them. And so we are taking referrals now. You could talk to myself or Thomas about that. Next one, please. And then lastly, Bethany has mentioned too, our outreach program. She also mentioned the C-Click Fix, and I don't even have a slide on here about it, but our outreach program is built to respond to your calls in Shoreline within an hour. And I believe we've been doing an okay job at that. And so we've been able to connect with a lot of Shoreline community members. And also, even in my 3 years, we've housed a lot of the neighbors you've been seeing that were unhoused. And we're just getting new people flowing in on the E-line. So very thankful, though, for the outreach program that exists and the partnership that we have with the City of Shoreline and being able to reach out to people who need it. Additionally, we have 5 locations in what we call housing assistant points. And so basically, we have a Lake City Partners staff member available at different times every week at the same place. So we are currently located at the hangar in Kenmore, the Shoreline Resource Center, and 2 times at the Lake City Library. We have drop-in hours at Aurora Commons, and we are also available at North Seattle College every single week. And so this is where we basically act as resource navigators. We're able to make referrals to the senior shelter, referrals to Oaks when it's open, referrals to other shelters, coordinated entry for all. We're able to do those assessments for people, and they're really being heard and carried and added to our caseload. And that's really how you make the most out of these systems, is finding someone who sticks with you. So we are excited, and we're expanding more locations, more on board, and we're really looking forward to what 2025 has for us. So next, cool. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Courtney, and I remember when the Oaks opened up, there was a lot of neighborhood concern about it being a very low barrier shelter, and that folks could come in if they had substance abuse. There wasn't going to be any policing. Am I right in that there have been very few issues with that? Very few, is that a correct statement?
I'll use this one really quick. So as part of that agreement of the Oaks opening, we had a MOU between us, the Oaks, and King County. And part of that is we were to track the number of 911 calls from the Oaks. And so I was the one that did that. And I had a crime analyst at King County provide me a list of those, and I tracked them. So it was actually lower as you can imagine, that being a nursing home, there was lots of calls for medical attention and other things. And there were some calls. Things happen when people live together. But more things happened in a nursing home, which, it took a 2-year average from before it closed, obviously. So neither was really high or unreasonable. So yeah, that's pretty much what we did. So, and then we stopped tracking after the agreement. Yeah, it's been pretty quiet, I think, mostly. Yeah.
Community supports community, and they understand that shelter is shelter and that we need to be here and follow the rules and the guidelines that we have. Some, it is hard for some, but it does work out.
Thank you for your patience.
My name's Alan again. About 5 or 10 years ago, the tent cities were a popular option where people could have a safe place to stay, have sanitation services, communal kitchen. What has happened to that program? Because I don't see them anywhere anymore.
They're still out there, and actually we do have ability in Shoreline within our code to have them, and St. Dunstan's does host them every once in a while. I'm not sure if they hosted them recently. I think, yeah, recently. I don't, by the library too, yeah. And they have, I don't want to say pretty strict, maybe that's not the right term, but part of it is they have to have fencing, so it's, sort of draped. They do have to have sanitary. They are pretty self-regulated, I guess, too. And I know the one here at St. Dunstan's had gotten pretty small at one time. It only had like 15 people in it. But yeah, they're still around. I think there's one in Kenmore right now. They move from kind of city to city because I think our permits only allow 90 days or 6 months. So, but yeah, they're still around.
One more quick question. The new high-rise apartment that's just south of Costco on the east side, what is that building? St. Margaret's, okay.
Yeah, that is permanent supportive housing. That property, the underlying property, the city owns. It was remnant property left over by the Aurora Corridor project when we came through and did, did Aurora, I guess, with the sidewalks and the median and the whole thing. So we own the land still. We lease it to Catholic Housing Services. They built, with grant funding in King County, the building, and they operate permanent supportive housing out of that building.
Yeah.
100 units.
I have a question, or actually I have a bunch of questions, but you had mentioned, Stephanie, the city had directed staff to think big on the human services and housing plan, and I know there was a couple of ideas in there, but they weren't very well fleshed out in my recollection. You said like in 2015 the city declared an emergency on homelessness. Right now, there's a little bit more than 1% of the budget is allocated towards homelessness and human services. I'm not an expert on this, but I assume that this is going to take money. And I know that the state of Washington, it's completely possible for a city to pass an affordable housing levy. It sounded to me like the direction that the council was giving you was to come up with a plan. My recollection might be wrong, but do you have an update on the plan for kind of the Think Big plan? Like, I know there was some money allocated in the budget, the biennium, for an external contractor or something to do that, or?
Yeah, so in the budget that just passed for 25-26, we do have some funding allocated for an affordable housing feasibility study. That's not a homelessness, how to find funding to solve the housing and homelessness issue necessarily. Yes, we were told to think big. Unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, I think there's budgetary issues. And as much as I would like to come up with a further plan, again, we need further direction and money to do that. And so that is not something that is in our current budget to do so. So that's the direction that we currently have. Is we did get additional funds in this budget, and we will continue to advocate for that, but that is the current state of our budget right now.
Thank you guys for having this tonight. It's been really, seeing the work that Lake City Partners is doing and seeing the work that City of Shoreline is doing is really good. I've lived in Seattle, King County for 33 years. So my mom lived on 87th and Aurora, and my dad lived on 205th and Aurora. So I've been going up and down here. And to bring it back to Pioneer Square, I think it's interesting to hold the fact that, you know, one of the first sweeps that ever happened in Seattle was at City Hall Park, and it was actually back after the fire in the 1800s, and it was due to people losing their house and moving to what was closest to their city officials, like the mayor. They felt the safest nearest to the mayor, the City Hall. And so their neighbors were the ones that called to have them swept from the park because they had nowhere to go. And, you know, they said at that time that the solution to homelessness was affordable housing. This is back in the late 1800s. And you guys can go to the seattle.gov website and read this for yourself. It's on the homelessness page. And so I just, you know, I think it's interesting to kind of be 100 years, more than 100 years now later, and still in the same boat. We're still sweeping people from City Hall Park, and kind of what are we funding with the sweeps? What are we funding with, you know, and we can get into those questions and answers later, but I think that it's important to hold the fact that we do absolutely have to make the investment at some point, or else it's never gonna end. You know, as someone that's lived unhoused, been in Shoreline, sleeping in my car, like, you know, 15 years ago with, you know, it's like, there's a lot to be said about there's no place for an older woman that doesn't have mental health disorders to go. There's more oftentimes than not, you're not qualifying for the services than you are qualified for the services. And I went through domestic violence, still was homeless, still going through domestic violence, but I made the mistake of saying I made myself safe. I found a place to go that I didn't think my partner knew where I was. And that disqualified me from getting access to services because they need to help the most vulnerable people or the most prioritized. And that's okay. Like, this is a systems problem, right? But we need to have these conversations about, you know, what does it mean when people are homeless and how do they get there, you know? And then the last thing I wanted to touch on, sorry, is the point in time count, the numbers that you were bringing up. So the reason that it looks a little funky is because 1 year we do sheltered only. That was that year, that 9,000 number is the sheltered homeless. And then every other year we do the unsheltered and sheltered count. So 22 and 24 are gonna look more similar in their numbers. 21 and 23 are gonna, well, maybe not 21 because COVID, but sans COVID numbers, you guys get that. So yeah, so just holding that 9,000 number was a sheltered number, and that's kind of where that HUD number comes from. So thank you guys.
Just a comment of concern about families and youth. So we look at providing housing for adults, but kids are a big issue. I was a teacher at Shorecrest, and I had a homeless student at Shorecrest. He grew up in Shorecrest, became homeless, slept at the men's shelter downtown, except for he didn't sleep because he absolutely feared for his life. He wore his backpack across his chest and stayed awake all night, and then came to school to sleep. And God knows where he got any food. So we need to make sure that kids and parents with children are also included in this. Where do we house those who are homeless? Because it's all ages.
Completely agree. So I'll start by saying that completely agree. We do, in King County, we do have a family shelter line. Again, we don't have enough spots for families, but there are, there is a family shelter line that folks can call every day to get a spot for that. And in terms of teen, we don't have one up here. There are teen shelters on the east side,
And school districts are supposed to follow, if a kid is homeless, they can remain in the school district and get transportation, et cetera, et cetera. So if they are housed, if they end up housed at the shelter, I think it's called Willows on the east side, or I'm not sure exactly what the name is on the east side, they can continue to go to Shorewood. They'd have to get transportation from that location. That is a requirement of federal government. So there are lots of access and resources. Again, lack of beds, that's just a fact of any sheltering, but yeah. And that Hope Link, we do provide that funding that's for family. And same with Mary's Place. Online question, real quick. I see you. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I just want to pivot to folks online. Pam had asked the question about reluctance to accept housing placements, and there's a media kind of narrative that's perpetuated that people are refusing services when offered them. I think, Carrie, you're probably really well suited to, speak to that and, what the reality is around that. So thanks for the question, Pam.
It's a great question. And dare I say that shelter and housing is even offered when these sweeps happen. It's unfortunate, but it's because of the lack of shelter beds and the lack of permanent supportive housing, let alone just how strenuous the process is into getting people into shelter and even housing. I don't know if you guys are familiar with these terms, but chronic versus literal homelessness. I know, Al, you were talking about what about right now? Well, in order to qualify for some shelters, you have to prove that you've been homeless for at least 12 months. And so I don't think it's more or less... That's a great question. You have to be in the system. Homelessness management information system is one that all of King County uses, and you have to be in the system. You can attest for 3 months on your own. You still got to collect the 9 months elsewhere. But back to what Pam's question is, I wouldn't say that there's reluctancy. I would say that there's false hope and empty promises that are given time and time again by systems and service providers, and that's not on them. Of course, when you have someone crying saying how bad they need shelter, you're going to tell them, I will get you shelter. Never happens. And so, again, I don't think it's reluctancy. I think it's the lack of above everything.
One more question from online before we pivot back to in the room. Thanks for your patience here physically. CJ, I think CJ's similarly, joined by a lot of people in the community who have, expertise and passion for the folks who are experiencing homelessness and in helping in some way, and has a lot of background on, being a peer in the situation that folks are experiencing and navigating and asking for a way to plug in and to help. And so I thank you so much for the comments that you've dropped already. But CJ wants to know, why aren't we using city spaces to just have a drop-in space where folks can come get their services? People are there. They're there to help you. Potentially they're peers. They've experienced similar circumstances to you. And CJ's highlighting also that this potentially could be a tax-saving measure to reduce, demands on police and fire and other things if we have a place where folks can go. Bethany.
That is a great question. So currently, the city actually doesn't own too much property, and the property that we do own is pretty maxed out in terms of what it's used for. So we own City Hall, and we don't actually own our Spartan Recreation Center. And I would also say that while we want to make these spaces available, we need to be really planned out, and we need to make sure we have the right services and the right folks providing those services in the right location. So we want to make sure that if we have a day center, it's in the right location, it has transit availability, it has locations again where it makes it easy to get to with other service providers. And, actually this building wouldn't be a bad spot, but a lot of people we found when we had, a few years ago, remember it was really, really hot, like summer of 2021, we have done cooling centers before. We did one out here with KCRHA's help. People don't want to come to City Hall for that. they see the police, and if they're in house, they don't want to come here. So that's not where they want to. That's not where they want to come. They think things are going to happen here. So not always the best spot. They want to be in a place that is their place and is where they feel safe. So that's not always something with a big sign that says City of Shoreline on it. So that's probably the biggest reason. I'm going to go. Well, thank you, Mike. Yes, Mike D's the man. We do hold community court here in this very space, but even more important, honestly, is every Tuesday afternoon in the reception area here at City Hall. I'm pointing to it if you're in person. We have a community resource center where Mike D is almost every Tuesday, right? And you can come find service providers and come talk to Mike. There is food you could pick up. There's the health department here. I've seen Carrie here before. Shoreline Community Care is here. Lots of agencies. HopeLink stops by. So if you need help and you want to come talk to somebody, that would be the place to go, or to refer people to. So it's from 1:30 to 3:30 pretty much every Tuesday. I'm going to go to him because,
I'm Mark Garrett. There were some questions before. I might have some insights. So I work with a tiny nonprofit, tiny, small. We're getting there. Called Anything Helps. And in 2021, Mike and I and a couple other volunteers spent 6 months in the Bitter Lake camp in Seattle. And I got to know 140 homeless people who were there, came in and out, and we got ID for most of them. We got them all into shelter by the end of the 6 months. But I did a survey of 50 people there, and I asked all kinds of questions. And the most interesting, insightful questions were, where was your last stable housing, like where you paid rent or somebody paid rent? And the answer was all up and down the I-5 corridor. There were like, out of 50 people, and maybe there were 3 from out of state, you know. So everybody is from here. They're all from Western Washington. They all had work. They all had jobs, except for an odd person who got kicked out by their mother when they were 14, who'd been homeless ever since. You know, there were some people like that. But a lot of them, you know, had work and jobs. And then so the root cause of homelessness is the lack of housing. There's no cheap housing to be had. But then what I call the proximate cause of homelessness was like, well, how did you lose your last stable housing? And the answers to that were like, well, I was living with 3 guys, and the landlord sold the building, and I couldn't find somebody to room with, or I was living with my partner, and we got in a fight, and they kicked me out, or I was living with 3 people, and they were paying the rent, and then they kicked me out, or I got in a fight and I had to leave, you know. So it's like somebody has an arrangement where they can share the rent with somebody, and then they lose that arrangement, and they're forced to try to find an apartment they can afford by themselves, and they just can't afford it, and they end up homeless. So like, that's what the stories were like, and I found it very rare that somebody said, oh, I got into drugs and I lost my job, and you know, I couldn't pay my rent. Lots of the homeless people in camps are on drugs, but they got into the drugs afterwards, you know, because, as you know, in January, in the dark, in the rain, in Seattle, it's pretty miserable. But it was just very insightful to do an interview with 50 people and to get to know 100 people and figure out their stories. And one group of people, I told them, they said, because I dress like this, and they said, why are you helping us? What are you doing out here? And I said, you guys are like the people I went to high school with. Like, you're Americans, you know? Like, I know you guys. You know, you're very familiar to me. So anyway, that's what I learned in Bitter Lake.
Really appreciate that perspective. Thank you.
What I learned in Bitter Lake. Well, first of all, I just want to say, you know, Lake City Partners and the Oaks Shelter is amazing. You guys have permanently housed and sheltered a number of our clients, and The fact that you allow for referrals from partners the way you do is just tremendous. The environment is just so calming. I've had people that I've worked with for years that couldn't stabilize in even like a domestic violence shelter that's meant for peace, and they couldn't settle in, and they're settling into the Oaks, and it's just, you guys are just doing great work. Like you said, the community, the connection, I think that's why you see the 911 calls drop. I think when you feel like a part of a community, you start taking a vested interest, and kind of like what Mark said, those 6 months that we spent out there, we were building community, and so we were putting some skin in the game, and people felt vested in reducing, some of the troublesome behaviors, and I see you guys doing that at the Oaks, and that's not like the other shelters in King County, and I think that was kind of what I was going to point to, is that when we say chronic homelessness is a year of homelessness with a disabling condition, but it's so much more than that. There's this experience where you have to reconcile like this despair that you feel with this lack of hope, or this hope that is you're trying to hold on to, and then you're also habitualizing this survival state, and you're actually getting pretty good at it, and so you end up kind of having to let go of that want and that desire to be rehoused, because it starts becoming just as uncomfortable as me going to the gym. I haven't gone to the gym in forever, right? It's going to be really uncomfortable for me to go back to the gym. But once I get used to it, good to go, right? It's going to feel weird not going to the gym. It's literally the same thing with housing. The people that we were able to get into permanent housing at that encampment, we would give them literally exactly what they were asking for. And it would still take a lot of support to get them inside. And it's not because they didn't want it. That's exactly what they wanted. I want to get in better shape, right? It takes some time, it takes some support. And I think what we see a lot of with people refusing options is, first of all, a lack of understanding of what those options are, because we don't do a very good job of explaining what those environments are like. And second of all, we don't ask people how we can help. We just assume we know what they need, and then we ask them to follow us, and they're not going to do that. And so we need to do a better job as stewards of trust in the community to, allow them to, have a voice in how our services are provided. And I think the Oaks just does a really good job of that. So I really appreciate the partnership.
Thank you. And I appreciate everything that Anything Helps has been doing. And I do want to add to the comment of reluctancy, and kind of what Mike has touched on, is a lot of these shelters in King County and Seattle are congregate shelters. Again, they're just inhumane environments for people to be living in. Of course, I know the county is doing the best that they can to address this issue, but when you come to the Oaks and you're following this model that Shoreline has gifted us and granted us, you have your own room, you get to stabilize again and rehab your own life and find your independence again without having to worry about your 3 bunkmates.
So it is 8:30 something. We're going to do a couple more questions. And if you have to leave, of course, please leave. But we're happy to stay for a few. I see here, here, and here. And so here we go.
We really haven't talked as much about solutions, but I have a suggestion. I've tried to register my family, and I didn't know we weren't in charge of the Spartan Center for.
Well, I'll say we run programs at the Spartan Center. We don't own the building.
Gotcha. Yeah. Tried to register to be able to use the gym, to use the showers. Because right now, families, we have to go down the street to the Y, and they do not give free memberships. And it's quite, it's $70 for a family, and that's a big family, and that's their cheap. So that is a huge issue. And I've tried to register at Spartan Center and Parks and Recs, not very homeless friendly, I will say. And 2, I have one over at the community college, and there are several homeless students over at that community college and around that, how do you say it, Chrysalis Center or whatever? Krista Center and stuff, and a lot of people over there. And we're not doing anything, and I don't see any networking or anything per se with the city, and maybe I don't see it with them over there with those students, and they're just like, I went with one person, they referred down to Seattle. They didn't even anything here, just you need to go down to Seattle, or if you want housing, go to Edmonds. They've got housing up there at that community college or Everett, but nothing really here to support homeless college students. And so those are two areas to possibly look at for improvement here in the city of Shoreline.
Appreciate your feedback. Thank you.
I have a question to kind of piggyback on what you said earlier, your comment about units available for rent, how many there are that are open. I live in Richmond Highlands. I saw on the check-it sheet that there's really no representation here, so step up. But if you look out the window and see the blue and white crane, that's where I live over there. And so that apartment complex is going to be open this summer, I believe, and it's going to be 395 units. Just north of that, where the ice skating arena used to be, in the future, it's going to be another 300 and something units, although I believe that has been stalled. You look north on Aurora, and there's new housing, apartments or condos. Right here on Aurora, there is as well. And so I guess my question is, does the city have an idea of how many of these units are open? But really, like, as far as the economical people that understand supply and demand, I understand there's clearly still people that are moving to Washington and moving to this area, but at what point do all of these units actually drive the pricing down? Because the 20% that are called affordable, the definition of affordable is still quite expensive. Oh yeah, go for it, Oliver.
I was looking at this today, and Chris Roberts liked my social media post, by the way. So the city of Shoreline, I was trying to find any other city in the state of Washington that has built as many units or has approved the permits for as many units as Shoreline. No other city has. On a per capita basis, I don't think any other city in the country, I mean, I don't know. I'm open to anybody telling me I'm wrong. But City of Shoreline has built more housing and it has more housing in the pipeline than any other city around. And so I think the city gets an A+ on that. You know, my question to you, and I keep asking this question, is I think the city is not getting an A, though, on actually addressing homelessness, because there's a lot of market rate housing that's coming on. There's going to be MFTE, you know, affordable at the 80% AMI rate, but I don't feel like there's a, you know, really going out and like getting a shelter, getting a safe parking space for folks, you know, getting an affordable housing levy passed, right? Which I know is going to be politically unpopular here, but, you know, actually, you know, going and getting the money together, which is going to cost a lot of money to house people at, you know, who are below 30% AMI. I realize that, but, you know, this is a very wealthy city, and certainly considering how well the city has done in terms of building market rate housing, I think the city, it's time the city like stepped up and started doing something about the 30% AMI and below. But anyway, that's my opinion.
And I would say I don't necessarily disagree with you, Oliver. I mean, I think, in fact, in the things I've looked at, where we're lacking is the 0 to 30, 0 to 50 in terms of what we're responsible for in terms of growth in the region. And we are building a lot of housing. And I do think we went from nothing to something, and where we're going to go next, it's probably needs to do more. And right now it's just budgeting at this point and priorities. And hopefully we can continue to increase the funding that's allocated to these type of services, whether that's behavioral health, whether it's HopeLink with Rent Assistance and the food bank, because all of those things are so intertwined with this. As you mentioned, whether it's, fights with your neighbors, and that's the RACER program too, in terms of behavioral health services that go out with our police officers. So all of those things that can prevent the issue in the first place. So I'm going to go over here, Patty, then back, because you've been waiting patiently. Thank you.
My name is Pat Deegan, and these two address kind of my issue as well. But I do feel there's been an incredible amount of building, and it's not the City of Shoreline hasn't been doing it, but it's been the private. But I'm sure the City of Shoreline has had a piece in it. They've probably given them, like you said, property exemptions or property tax exemptions, or if they have a certain percent. I don't know what the percentage is, but how about a 25%? I don't know what the word is, low-income housing for a new building, because there's so many. It just seems like Shoreline has encouraged it. They really encouraged building, but I don't think they're housing the people that we're talking about.
So in terms of the MFTE program, that is a state program. We cannot change the percentages and how the income level. That is, like I said, that's a state program, and for how many years, because that is a tax exemption, and it's a tax exemption on, it's not a complete tax exemption, right? They still pay taxes, they just don't pay it on the difference of the improvements. When it comes to the station areas, they get no benefit unless they do a tax exemption. That is affordable housing forever on that building. So they have to keep those well past the MFTE if they do MFTE as well on those buildings, but they have to keep those, I think it's either 20% or 10%, depending on which program they choose, but that is a covenant on that property that's on a title, recorded.
Yeah. If they've been building so very many apartments, we've been building, you don't think the city has something to do with that? You don't think the city is encouraging those buildings? I mean, in the sense that there must be something you're not talking about that makes the builders want to put up these.
Right.
Okay.
And
so they mandate that they go to Shoreline without us having input on who can live housing.
The station areas, we upzoned in those station areas, meaning we allowed density in preparation, knowing that this, in order to meet our growth targets as a city that is put on, basically we're told that we need to plan for X amount of units. And 10 years ago, our council said, okay, well, we have to plan for it. We know the stations are coming, and we do want to preserve our neighborhoods in some manner, because we as a community think that's important. Let's upzone, put those buildings near the stations, which makes sense. People can walk. We're now building a bridge, which will be really cool when it goes in, and put those folks so they can easily walk to the light rail stations. So that's the decisions that the council that were in office at that time made. It's the market too, right? We have these areas ripe for that kind of redevelopment. And some of it is interest rates, right, too? And that's what slowed down some of the stuff. So I've got somebody back here real quick.
Yeah, my name's Rebecca Chan, and I'm a Shoreline Community College trustee, and I wanted to address the question about the community college students. This summer, we've started housing homeless students in our residence hall that's on campus in partnership with King County. And also on our campus, we have a United Way hub. So that's where you can, get services and any help that you might need. Just wrap around, basically.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, we got 2 more questions coming.
Just really quick, this is more informational rather than a question. So I want to thank all the citizens in Shoreline, whether they are doing food drives, the school district does food drives. I know my own neighborhood did a food drive November, December, but also a big thank you to all the churches who make a huge difference in this equation. You have the Shoreline Free Methodist Church regularly also hosts Tent City, and of course all the stuff that St. Dustin's does. Ronald United Methodist has free meals. Prince of Peace Lutheran has free meals. people who grow vegetables for the love of growing produce at Twin Ponds have a community garden, that all of that food goes to Hope Link. So we're all in this together, and I appreciate everybody who helps out.
All right, pass that back one last.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you. I was just going to say, you know, just circling back to that think big idea, you know, I think there's a lot of talk about, you know, I thought the idea of lowering AMI for a little bit would be great, you know, going down to 25%. It's not really possible because we're, again, attributing affordability to a place, right? And I think what a lot of people lose sight of is that a lot of us in this room have social mobility, which means that, you know, if our work changes or if we need to move to another location, 100% fine, I'll go find a new place to live, right? But when you're attributing the affordability label to certain units, what happens is you're working with limited stock, and your ability to move around is very limited, which is in turn going to contribute to intergenerational poverty. It'll attribute to concentrated poverty, which is a huge issue, especially with the plans with the transit center development. You know, you look at the International District, I had to move out of that location because it was just too, you know, you're creating maladaptive social norms where people are normalizing environments that aren't conducive to their recovery, to their stability, and it's all that they have to compare, you know, normalcy to when you surround people in the same, you know, poverty-stricken area. And so, you know, that perpetuates systemic racism. It perpetuates all kinds of different things that we don't want. And so I think, just to give you another tug at that big idea thing, you know, attributing affordability to people is a good idea. It eliminates the social mobility issue. It creates better school districts because you're not segregating school districts anymore. You're giving people the ability to move closer to their work. You're making things a lot easier, giving back community to people. Yeah. I think it's something that we really need to start considering what that looks like. Thank you.
Well, we really appreciate everyone coming out tonight, both online and in person. And I know Mallory we've had a very active chat, and if there's follow-up questions, we will be sure to get back to everybody. And for those in person, I'll be here for a little bit if you want to chat more with me. I do have business cards out here as well. I think, Mallory, do you have cards out there too? So go ahead if you'd like to have an offline or online conversation with me or Mallory, please do. And we really appreciate everybody coming out tonight. Thank you so much. And a round of applause to Carrie, who's doing the actual work. Thank you.